Good morning, SMS Chihong Tat. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today, and thank you to my distinguished panel for joining too. The theme, as we know, of Maritime Week this year is ambition meets action. And referring back to the opening speech, in fact, of Minister Iswaran, he brought together the reference to practical solutions to the shared ambitions, and SMS also referred to it around decarbonisation, digitalisation, and maritime talent. And as we've talked about already, maritime talent is also a key enabler to decarbonisation and digitalisation. And so reinforcing SMS's words, it's really, people are really at the heart of everything that we do, and critical, absolutely critical to our success in the future, challenging some of these big issues for our industry. So this panel and my colleagues is very pertinent in terms of talking about emerging skills and future jobs in our industry. And I want to spend the panel session really going into the understanding the challenges and the opportunities that we have ahead of us, some of the upskilling needs, and attraction and retention in our maritime industry, which is another absolutely critical issue. So, with your permission, I'm going to dive straight in. And for Richard, I'm going to ask, and Nicholas, please be on standby, because I'm going to kind of explore further with you on this one. But Richard, how do we leverage on technology to better prepare our workforce for the future of work in maritime? And perhaps you could also highlight some of the promising technologies, the softwares that our industry can adopt and equally prepare for.
Thanks. Thank you, Nick. And thank you very much for inviting Microsoft here on this very, very key event here. I think, I'm the non-maritime person here, and it's kind of a little bit out of place, but actually I do have a family member who started her career in the maritime industry. I think the world of technology is evolving very rapidly. I think Senior Minister said it well, that the challenges that the maritime industry is facing around decarbonization, digitalization is here upon us. And when you think about the technology landscapes as it evolved, all right, let me just go off a little bit. Who here had not heard of ChatGPT? I'm sure everybody did. Now, when you think about technologies like artificial intelligence, like cybersecurity, like data analytics, these are core technologies to a lot of different industries, and including the maritime industry as well. I think when I interact with my colleagues at MPA, Kenneth, Ihan, I see you there as well. The amazing thing is that the amount of technology that's required to keep the operations running, the seafaring workers as well as the onshore workers engaged in their work, and seeing the progression that they have in different aspects of their career in the industry itself, I think is really exciting. This is when we think about how companies can leverage technology itself, we think about role models and progression. When there are role models in the industry looking at how individuals have gained different skills and be able to transfer from, let's say, roles to roles, different parts of the industry itself, and yet be able to bring the experiences from the other aspect of the industry to another, let's say, aspect of the industry itself, I think that's really exciting. So when we think about some of this industry, and as we think how companies are looking at, let's say, upskilling and reskilling some of their workers itself, I really think about that when you amplify the role models and showing that progressions that some of the individuals have made across the industry itself, I think this will be very inspiring for a lot of the companies and the employees as well.
Thank you, Richard, for those reflections. It's good to have the out-of-industry look at what's ahead for us as well. Thank you. Nicholas, wearing your class, your ABS, your personal hat, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you. I'm honored to be here with my esteemed colleagues. So at ABS, in my role as head of talent management and learning, we look after various stakeholder groups from a learning perspective. That would include our internal core employees, which would be our plan review engineers. Those are engineers who sit in an office. We can really train them in a very traditional sense, although we're certainly always looking for new opportunities to do that. We also have our field surveyors who are engineers, but they are 1,500 individuals distributed around the world, basically in field environments. So it's a very different core set of employees from that engineering group that I mentioned earlier. In addition, we have external clients, port state authorities, flag state authorities, clients, things like that. And so there's 3 areas that I'd really like to talk about in various levels of maturity where we've taken first steps here, right? And the first area is, and this is very specific to our surveyors, our field-based engineers, is adaptive microlearning. So basically what we've done there is partner with a vendor called QStream, Q as in question stream, and essentially have basically started to give them sort of algorithmic learning in small chunks. Now, as a core company, we can determine how much learning they get and how they get it. So basically we decided for our pilot last year, we were going to do a training that was on our remote survey rule, right? So basically we said this is going to be an 8-week training. In this 8 weeks, they are going to get 3 sort of content inputs per week. These inputs are 3 to 5 minutes each, and there are questions given. And the better that our surveyors do on the questions, as the algorithm will adjust the question difficulty and the essentially what's being pushed at them from a learning perspective. So what we saw and so how does this help, right? There's a lot of engagement, there's gamification, there's actually better knowledge retention. The whole promise of this tool is to what we would call combat the forgetting curve, right? And so basically that somebody is, and finally, it's based on scenarios rather than sort of rote memorization. So basically, instead of trying to memorize a fact and then you'll forget it, it's based on scenarios. So what we saw after we ran this pilot program was about 13% gain in knowledge, right? So that's a modest gain. But the 2 hidden facts, or the 2 things that we were most pleased about, was in the areas where there was the biggest gap, where there was the biggest knowledge gap, we saw 20 to 40% knowledge gain, which was amazing for us. And then we additionally, from a producer standpoint, we were able to produce the training in 50% less time than a traditional training. If I could skip on to the second piece, it's really about what we're doing in the meta environment. So we are about to introduce a new training facility in Qatar on LNG. We are taking first steps into the meta environment. We have partnered with an organization that has a lot of maritime experience called Orca Informatics, and we've essentially created 3 fully detailed, highly realistic virtual assets. 1 a tanker, 1 a container ship, and 1 an LNG vessel. And essentially, they have 5 years of data built into them. Again, from a gamification standpoint and a simulation standpoint, it offers excellent opportunity for us to train both internal and external clients on LNG or these other areas. And so basically what we can do, we've built in 3 levels. We would basically say, okay, what kind of vessel do I want to go onto? Is this a container ship? Is this an LNG? How old is it? And what's the condition of it? And then basically, based on those variables, you will have a different experience. So hundreds of permutations of learning opportunities. Also, there's a lot of safety learning opportunities because, for example, on the LNG ship, we can actually illustrate in this simulated environment where there are high-risk areas, which you wouldn't necessarily see in a live environment, right? And so that we're just about to take our first steps there with our center opening in May. And then the final thing I would say is that we've just entered into a partnership with Texas A&M University in Texas to study wearables for mariners in an offshore environment. Wearables have their own sort of safety risks, especially in an industrial environment like offshore. And basically, we're going to focus on the user experience and what that should look like to help guide the industry in terms of how wearables should be used. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicholas. Some fantastic initiatives there. It terrifies me, the idea of algorithms learning from how well you answer the question to increase the hardness. I think it would get easier for me on some of the questions, perhaps. You talk at the heart, and I think gamification is a key enabler to certainly increasing that engagement. I think there's some statistics such as if you learn through engagement, you're more likely to remember over 70% of what you're trained in versus purely drawing from the knowledge, which is more likely, I think something like 80% of knowledge you're likely to forget through doing that. So fantastic. Perhaps I can move on and make the link between technology and welfare. And Mary, as SMOU, as a union, as a training provider, you must be very much looking at technology and how it can improve the welfare of our seafarers.
Thank you, Nick. A very good morning to all of you, and thank you, MPA, for giving me the opportunity to be in this panel. Indeed, what you shared, technology, it is important for us to tap on technology to improve the working environment of our seafarers and impact them in a positive way. I think this is absolutely necessary. And for us, we see it expedite, especially during the COVID period. I think all of us have gone through that difficult time. And for seafarers especially, we need to tap on technology to improve, to help them to improve on their welfare. And one of the areas that we saw increasingly prominent is the, the medical consultation, that you can do on board the ship right now. And basically, your ship could be away from shore, but before it arriving, but if you have got critical needs like that, you can actually tap on this remote, consultation, like such platform that we have been hearing, Speed Doc, Doctor Anywhere, and then of course we have this Impact Health, and so many different platforms whereby seafarers can tap on. And this is just one aspect of it. And of course, the other things that we really need to really look on, as earlier mentioned by Richard and Nicholas as well, is on the training aspect. I think it is important for our seafarers not to leave them out of this equation of technology, because at the end of the day, they are the one that is going to impact the performance of the whole organization. And that's what SMS Chi mentioned earlier on. We need that, to be at the heart of whatever things that we do as well, to bring them on board. And training and upskilling, it is absolutely necessary, and we can do it remotely as well, and we can actually do it, through technologies. And all of us became expert overnight during COVID. I never know what was Zoom. Right, I didn't know what was it, but until when COVID took place, I started to figure out, what is Zoom. We all became expert, overnight, Zoom, and micro, or whatever platform that it is. So for seafarers, it's likewise. And one other very important point that I think we should note is that on the safety and health aspects, right? When I mentioned earlier on was a physical aspect, but a mental well-being as well. We need that to train our seafarers on our mental wellness. And not only that, safety aspects, and that is where you can tap on technology to signal to us, what are the different aspects, as Nicholas mentioned that earlier as well. So it is important. And one other thing is that I really firmly believe that technology, we can improve on it, hearing the feedback from the ground, from the seafarers, and that is on communication. And that is on, internet access for them, whereby they could communicate and they could have that connection with their families, with their loved ones. Recently somebody from the aviation side shared with me, even that, they say that they are having a challenge right now to attract people to come on board aviation. I'm like, oh my goodness, what about for maritime? I think it is really, like I mentioned, many times before, it is an image deficit actually for shipping, for maritime. And there's a lot that we have to deal with it and that we have to do, especially when we talk about recruitment, we talk about how to attract them on board, And I think this is definitely very, very vital and very important for our seafarers to be able to have access to internet. To be able to have access, to connect with their families and with their loved ones. Aviation staff, they fly. I empathize with them as well. Challenges that they face, I'm sure SMSG would know because they deal with aviation transport as well. They can be away for a couple of days. But for seafarers, you're talking about how many months? 4 months, 6 months, and some even 11 months. Recently, I just got an email from a group of seafarers who are asking for our assistance because they have been on board of the ship for almost coming to 11 months. and they still have no news from their employers of when they are signing off. And they are getting very desperate, and that affects them mentally as well. So I think these are some of the issues that we need to deal with. Companies, I would really encourage you, please upgrade your system. And please let seafarers have good connectivity and allow them, to have that connection with their families, with their loved ones, and have that. I think that is absolutely very important. But we can tap on technology to impact the life of the seafarers. If we can't do that, I think we all fail. We all fail terribly, and we have to do something about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. I loved your passion on that. It's fantastic. And the criticality of linking the attraction and retention to welfare. And we've just said how important attracting high-quality maritime professionals to our industry is going to be. I want to explore that further in a minute and pick your brain further, if I may, in this area. Caroline, could you talk to me about the concerns, perhaps, of the industry, wearing your industry representation as the sector undergoes digital transformation and adopt sustainable solutions? How do we help people? How do we help SMEs to digitize and decarbonize?
Okay, thank you, Nick, and thank you for having me here. So before I go into your question, I do want to talk about technology. Just one sentence: technology and seafarer. Actually, the shipping industry is increasingly regulated. It has been for the last many, many years, and there are more documents to do, more checks to do, more checklists to do, more reports to do. Actually, I've always said that I want my seafarers to go back to doing seafaring. And that requires technology and digitalization to actually help them to make their job earlier. Push a button, the reports gets generated. They don't have to deal with that. All the sensors are there, giving all the data. That's what I hope to see on the ships. I mean, we are seeing that in the last few years. I see more digitalization, but there's a lot more we can do. Now, we talk about the concerns of the industry, and I will share what actually doesn't keep me awake, but it's always on my mind, of the concerns of the industry, especially in Singapore. We are so short of maritime talent. And in Singapore, the only resource we have is talent, is people. And I am fighting for talent with every single sector. And because now we are going into digitalization and decarbonization, we need talent from cross sectors. Just now I was talking to Clarence, and he was saying about the demand that he's seeing now, because he's in a talent firm, is really the IT professionals, the cybersecurity professionals, the data analysts, the risk analysts. So we are trying to even employ from this, and on top of my sector, my traditional roles. So I'm really fighting for talent. And we can see coming out of pandemic, there is really a global tussle for talent. So maritime is actually very international in nature. So I have the foreigners and I have the locals. And then I have everyone in between who has been here for many, many years. So there are two ways. How do I attract the talent, and how do I retain the talent? So attraction of the talent, actually just now one question is that, how do we get the young to love the sea? So I feel, how do we get everyone to love maritime and come into maritime? I think that is the struggle. And for me, taking national policies aside, my wish list is that I am agnostic to wherever you come from. If you have the talent and you have the passion and you want to be in this industry, maritime wants you. But of course, we are subject to the employment passes. And I really like the Compass framework. I like the values that underpin it. I like the way it is, the criteria that is very clear to get the employment passes. So I like that framework. So hopefully with that framework, we can get more foreign talent in, because I'm totally agnostic. I want the best talent in Singapore. So I don't care where you come from. Yeah, and I want my locals to be challenged by the foreign talent so that they also upgrade themselves. That's my wish list. Yeah. Then we talk about retention of talent. And when we talk about retention of talent, I was also speaking to Aaron, the chief officer from CMA CGM just now, and he was in the position where he transitioned from NOL to CMA CGM. Yeah, so I asked him, what is the difference in the culture of working for a Asian company and an European company? Okay, so I'm going to be very frank here. Don't get offended, huh? Okay, and he told me that it is the inclusivity and the open-mindedness of the European companies. And I think this is something that Asian companies can learn. How do we be more open? How do we be more inclusive? How do we encourage our people to speak up? And so that we can learn and we can be better employers. So that's how, on the retention side, one area. The other area, I also attended the Fast Stream conference where SMM was very good to do a report on all the skills, what are the skills required, and the thinking of the alphas and the Gen Zs. Sorry, I'm taking a bit too long, but give me 1-2 more minutes. Yeah. So when I was sitting in the audience and I was listening to the highlights, I just got very worried because my mindset needs to change as an employer. Because if my mindset doesn't change, I'm not going to attract the young to come and work for me. I am really the Gen X or the baby boomer thinking where you jolly well come to office. You come into office and you work in the office. I really have to think about how to excite them because they have so high expectations. They have short attention span because, you need to constantly engage them. How do I do that? For me, I think that is the takeaway that I have that I need to do. The employers all need to have a change in the mindset and see where are the areas we can do better. So that is one area from the employer side. Okay, the third area on retention of foreign talent that actually worries me is, we have so many foreigners, really good foreign talent in Singapore, and they leave us. They leave us after a few years because they don't feel appreciated in Singapore. Housing is expensive. Cost of living is high, and that's okay for them as well. But they can stay here for 10, 15 years, and they are unable to get better than an employment pass. And if they lose their job, they have to leave within a certain time. Their spouses are not able to work. Their children can't go to local school. They have to go to international school. I'm very mindful of the national considerations. SMSG is sitting there. I'm just saying my wish list, that we do have a more conducive environment, a more welcoming, a more appreciative environment for our foreign talent. So I still haven't gone to the digitalization for the SMEs part. Yeah, so just give me one more minute on the SMEs digitalization. Actually, for the SMEs, it was something that is very close to my heart because I am an SME. And when I became the president of SSA, I spoke to my council members and I told them SMEs is an area that I do want to concentrate on. And with the digitalization, it was very tough because SMEs have a very lean force and we don't have the resources and we are always fighting fire. So how do we get them to digitalize? And I have an amazing chair of Digital Transformation Committee, TSTO, and he literally worked together with MPA. We come up with a program office and we work with ESG. And now we have about 10 companies, small, medium-sized companies with us, and we are literally holding their hands to digitalize. And this is what I want to do more I still have 2 more years if I get elected in June. So sense of urgency here. I need to bring more companies to digitalize. And I will take that same approach when we come to decarbonization. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Wonderful, wonderful perspectives. I'm not even going to try and summarize. Thank you. Praveen, can I move on to you if I may? The practicality for our seafarers to adopt some of these new solutions, decarbonisation, digitalisation, and how will this change the future of work at sea?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I actually thought you will run out of questions after Caroline's.
Perhaps that's a good prompt for some votes onto Pigeonhole, please, if you haven't already put your question in. Sorry, Praveen.
Yeah. Thanks to MPA and organizers, Informa, to include Volume Group on this panel. Very much appreciate this. The practicality of implementing various solutions on board, I think one of the issue which was mentioned by Caroline as well, and Mary Liu, that the practicality, one of the biggest limitation is the mindset of the organizations itself, the shore staff. So what happens is there is so much of talk about the technological advancements on the ships that we tend to focus so much on just the seafarers and the ships alone, while forgetting that there are people sitting on the shore jobs, many of them are seafarers, old school, new school, all type, but cast in a certain culture where things are done in a certain manner. So I think the mindset change and all the changes that we talk about, behavioral competencies, the digitalization, this has to start from the leadership. Yeah, the top bosses have to buy in, they have to drive it, and then the shore side has to change first to become the enabler for the changes to come in the seafarer side. The second issue is on the practicality side, I think the digitalized solutions are still very siloed. There are too many solutions, there are inconsistent protocols, and that actually make it difficult for a seafarer when they move from one ship to another ship, because the seafaring is a job where you get to change your ship, you may be in a different company tomorrow. So it becomes hard to have a consistent approach towards these solutions. There are a lot of training solutions out there, but if you see really deep down inside, you find the training content is not as good. It is not as impactful. We are not even going to a level where we are talking about gamification or having adaptive learning. Of course, that is the future. That is the right way. But we are talking about what is the practical hindrances in actually implementing some of these solutions. I think some of these solutions are also limited by the cost. The amount of investment which is required when you actually transition roles from one job to another job. Leave alone the thinking that goes into it and redesigning the framework. So these are some of the practical limitations for the seafarers. But the biggest one remains actually the mindset change in the organizations itself.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Praveen. Okay, we've all the panel members have answered a question or two now, so the questions get a little bit harder now, and it's open panel on this. So, in fact, linking it to Caroline, you talked earlier about one of the recruiters seeing these new roles coming into our industry that we haven't seen before. So perhaps with that in mind, and whether it's, I think you mentioned sort of the analysis side or cybersecurity, data-driven technologies. So as the maritime industry continues to evolve through digitalization and green technologies, the skills demanded will be cross-sectorial and transferable to our industry. Where does the panel see some of the skills that will be highly sought after in the future? Who would like to pick this up? Nicholas, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. This is the question I've been waiting for my answer, right? Because this is where the HR side of me will come out around the behavioral side, because I think, of course, there's a lot of great answers on very specific technical skills that we can talk a little bit about, but there's some that I'm very passionate about that we're really starting to focus on and trying to upskill our workforce on. And these are areas like, and it all starts for me for growth mindset and learning agility, because if you don't have a growth mindset as an individual, and you don't have this lifelong learning orientation, you will be challenged and you'll be left behind by the pace of change, right? Because at the end of the day, how you are trained now and how you learn now is very, very different from how people learned traditionally several years ago. So we have to really work on, and I do believe this is a trainable skill. I mean, if you have a fixed mindset, you can work your way towards a growth mindset. You can work your way towards a learning agility. It's the idea that you really have to be nimble. So what goes with that? Well, resilience and adaptability goes with that, right? So those are other skills in terms of your ability to sort of fail forward if you're resilient, and the adaptability just due to the pace of change. Another area that I'm really pushing into our business, and I'm working with our chief engineer and our chief surveyor on, is this concept of literally just critical thinking and problem solving. Because at the end of the day, if you think about it, 40 or 50 years ago, mariners didn't have connectivity to the internet. They didn't have all the tools they have today. And the tools today that we have is a blessing. But at the end of the day, they had to solve problems and think through issues as they came up. So one of the challenges that we see is that the tendency is, well, if I've got a problem, I'm going to push it up to the next level. And I really want to stop that and push it back down, right? We really need to push decision-making and problem-solving down to the lowest level possible. And finally, and this is one where I just talked to my training director about it last week, we are going to start looking at developing a training for prompt engineering. And so prompt engineering really is, if I don't know how many people know that term, right? But at the end of the day, that is basically how you efficiently interact with an AI tool like a ChatGPT, because at the end, there are certain ways you can get much, much more efficient in terms of interacting with AI. And you might say, oh, you know what, AI is not going to be prevalent for everybody. But I would challenge you, when personal computers came out, were they prevalent for everybody? No. When cell phones came, were they prevalent for everybody? No. But I guarantee you that everybody in this room has at least one cell phone with them. So I do believe that our workforces will start to interact more and more, and it will become prevalent and everywhere that we will have these AI interactions with as learners, and you have to be really efficient too. And so prompt engineering is really all about training that efficiency. Thanks.
Thanks, Nicholas. Some points that really resonate, that as we go forward into this uncertain world, having this learner, this growth mindset is going to be critical. I continue to hear the whole critical thinking, problem-solving piece will be essential for our future maritime professionals. The other point that really resonated for me was, you call it failing forward. Some people refer to it probably failing safely, but when we don't know the environment, we have to have people that are ready to accept failure, and we need to provide a safe environment for them to fail and learn through. So thank you. Any of the other panel members want to talk about what some of the future skills, the critical sought-after future skills might be?
Yeah.
Praveen.
So I think what we hear is most of the skills that we need are not very different from what we need in maritime versus some other industries. So that's a key takeaway, because if those skills become more important, then upskilling, reskilling could be actually possible, if not difficult. Now, some of the soft skills which are identified by OCIMF and also by the World Maritime Forum would involve things like ability to work with remote teams, take complex instructions over communication channels and execute them, because it is quite possible, as the technology will evolve, then the expertise will not always be on the ship, but it will be on the shore. And then people need to work with remote instructions. There would still be teamwork, the ability to work with across different cultures. These will remain some of the top skills.
Thank you. Richard.
So Nick, if I may, I think when Nicholas talked about prompt engineering, it got my heart pumping. I think the notion around the growth mindset itself, it's really, really important. I think this is well steeped into the research of Professor Carol Dweck in Stanford University. And for us at Microsoft, when we transformed over the last decade itself, this was the real anchor that really helped us quite a fair bit. And in many ways, I think, to Caroline's point as well, and Mary's point as well, when you work with the employers and the different companies, and you see some of that cultural aspect of it, it actually can lead to a lot of changes in the way, let's say, employers or bosses think about how they would bring these technologies to their workers, despite any roles itself. I love the point about how we would think about, bringing AI and doing prompt engineering with a lot of large models and things like that. Because, look, this is a big traveling computer if you think about out in the sea itself. And there's just going to be lots of telemetry, lots of data, lots of manuals, lots of information, things like that. And this is where we started with the concept around co-pilots. I picked up a question that I saw on screen here, like how do we bridge the gap with, let's say, the more senior seafarers itself? We believe that technology should be accessible, should be approachable, not something that is scary. You got to have a computer science degree to be able to talk to that. No, you don't have to, right? So I've seen amazing stuff just in the last couple of months. People from all walks of life being able to leverage some of these developments in artificial intelligence itself and have them act as co-pilots to themselves. So I think this is a notion, this is a concept that we can think about how technology can be co-pilots to all the different roles in the maritime industry.
Thank you for that, Richard.
Thank you, Nick. I just wanted to add on to share that while things are moving so fast, in maritime with the technology, and we all talk about decarb, digitalization. In fact, I came to this conference also to find out what is the mindset of the employers as well. Do you have an answer on the future fuel? Anyone? We don't have the silver bullet. And but that was something that that there will be a potential there, in this. Just now, Nick, you mentioned about the growth mindset, and Richard as well, right? So it's so important to have the growth mindset and having that mindset of lifelong learning. And I think this is something that we have been advocating to our workers as well. It is absolutely vital because at the end of the day, I believe that the best welfare for our seafarers, for our workers, is to have a good jobs, to stay employable, and nobody will be left behind. So this is what I really, really felt, for. But moving forward, I also wanted to share that with this growth mindset of upgrading or upskilling, it is not just on the owner part of the seafarers. But I think it takes every one of us to come together. I don't know how to express it better, but we all have a part to play in this. And also, when we go into this journey, please bring the seafarers along. Bring the unions along. It is very important. Just now, I think SMSG mentioned about CTC, that we have already accomplished more than 1,300 CTCs. And it is quite a journey. But besides having that incentive, helping our companies to grow, bring the unions along and let us engage with the companies to find out what is the future plans of the company and what are your training needs and how can we help you to reach the final destination, which is ongoing. We can bring the workers along to train them, to upskill them. And that is very, very important. So let's collaborate and do it together. So this is really an important message to all of us.
Thank you, Mary, for that collaboration. Caroline.
So I need to come in, right? Everyone's
You do.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, so there is the hard skills and the soft skills. I think in the report by SMF, the survey that's done, they have already identified a number of soft skills that is required, and I think that's mentioned by Nicholas on quite an extent. So can I speak about a little bit on the hard skills. Again, the identification for me actually on the hard skills required is not difficult. It's how do we train our crew properly, and how do we train, so we talk about seafarers, how do we train them and giving them that fail-safe and environment, that safe space to work. And I speak from a company's perspective, and because I do try, you know, we bought some ships that were of a totally different type of engines. And my guys are so familiar with 4-stroke engines, and now they're going to 2-stroke engines with electronics. They may be familiar with 2-stroke engines, but they're not familiar with the electronics. And I needed to send them for training, and the training is so expensive. But it was important to do so. So for me, it's the accessibility to the simulation centers, because to let them fail safely, to give them that, you know, you press the button and something happens, and how do you react to it, all the scenarios. But to actually access to this training center, it is firstly, not many around. Secondly, it is expensive, because to have the simulators is also expensive. So when we go to the decarb journey, where the alternative fuels have so many safety concerns, my concern is really, do we have enough training centers, competent trainers who are able to train them properly? And the other part on the learner mindset, which I learned from Shell, the learner mindset, the growth mindset, and the curious mind is not only on the workers, but also the employers. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. I see Praveen itching, but before you do, if I may, just a question back to Caroline. The training centres, I mean, it's a great point in terms of making sure we've got adequately prepared and things. Is the onus on the seafarer to fill the technology gap, or should we be pushing a lot of the expectation back to the hardware manufacturers, the shipbuilders, the components, the engine manufacturers, to make sure that the technology, and perhaps this is linking back to Nicholas's point, that the technology helps the seafarer, it just doesn't load up the seafarer?
Yes, that's right. That's right. I totally agree. And you brought up a very good point. As I always say, in this decarbonization journey with the seafarers or the shore or the ships, everyone needs to have a skin in the game. You know, that means the engine manufacturers who comes up with the design and the manufacture, and they need to give us how do we operate this engine safely, what are the safety concerns. Someone spoke in one panel, it's not only the engine manufacturers, but it's also the designers and whoever brings in the components and the type of fuels, the fuel scientist needs to teach us how to manage these fuels safely. And I feel that it is the employer's responsibility to train our seafarers properly and to make sure that they go for the training. And I experienced that because when there was one ship we had to take over very urgently, and I had crew on board who was not familiar. And I went on board the ship and he talked to me, "Ma'am, I'm very scared, you know, because this one got electronics." I said, "If you're scared, I'm even more scared." You know, so it's important, and it's important that we do train them properly before we allow them to operate these new fuels. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think Caroline is right. The responsibility belongs to the employer. It belongs to the line managers, that the people who are actually doing the task are properly trained. But here is a factor which is socio-economic, and also the fact that we have to see where the seafarers come from, who are the largest suppliers of seafarers today. And when you look at, then you find actually seafaring is a profession where only those people who feel that if they join ship, then they are able to earn such a living, which is better than otherwise they would get around them. And this is what causes actually seafaring pools to move around. You know, UK used to be at one point, dominating factor in seafaring. They are still in maritime. But then it moved around, and now today, Philippines, India, and all these regions which have come up. Now, affordability of training is a very, very important factor. And this is where I think we miss out, because it is quite possible to have a state-of-art training center. We have SIT, SUTT, all working with NUS and SMU and having a very good framework. But what about the places where actually the seafarers come and they even work on Singapore flag vessels?
So hold that question. I think in the next panel they're going to explore some of the training aspects quite deeply. Thanks for the perspectives on that. That was great. I couldn't let go Richard's comment that ships are big, moving. Microsoft, you heard it here. Microsoft said ships are big, moving computers. I think that really kind of frames the future of the challenge and the opportunity for us as an industry. I'm going to move on to attraction and retention now, if that's okay, and spend a few minutes before going to the audience questions, just to pick up thoughts on where perhaps the panel sees opportunities for the new skills in digitalization and decarbonisation to access a new breed of seafarers. Any volunteers, any takers on that one?
I think, if you see, the data has been leading all the way. It has become a dominant factor. And understanding this complex data, the continuous feed of data, and even raw data, to have this put in a way where it makes sense and it actually helps seafarers is an important thing. So we are looking at data scientists, we are looking at data analytics, we are looking at people who are able to work with this interface, which is machine and human interface. So this is a skill which is definitely needed, and where actually we see a need for people from completely different domain.
And do you think it will make our industry more attractive by providing these new skills, these new job sets?
Exactly, it will. And the one thing is, actually, if you look today on ship, what has happened? The jobs have kind of piled up. The master, who used to be mainly navigating and commanding the ship, spends a lot of time now doing the paperwork, sending emails, and even trying to make sense of all that information that comes from various stakeholders. So if technology is there, if the data can be synthesized, if the automation can help seafarers, it will make seafaring attractive, because that means it is manageable. Part of the problem with seafaring today is when you go there, you are so much overwhelmed with amount of work that you are supposed to perform.
Thank you. Mary, I think.
Yes, thanks. Adding on to what the Praveen shared, I just wanted to, it just brings to my mind on an article that I've read by Richard Clayton about getting the best talent, for maritime, for shipping, means telling a good story. And just now earlier on, I mentioned that I think for seafarers and even for shipping, we really do have an image deficit and something that we need to address. And how can we attract in, millennial, just how Caroline spoke about, it's a concern, Gen Y, and down the road, Alpha. How do we get them in? I think we really, really need to address that. And there are gaps at this point of time, as much as the tripartite partners come together to work, and we still have a long way. I'm sure we have a lot of things that we can do together. But as what Richard Clayton shared about, means telling a good story. And I'm sure in this room right here, if I ask for a show of hand, or you stand up, how many of you were former seafarers before? And today, many hands are being raised here. And today you are successful. You are in the management. And you are inspiring, and you have many, many good stories to tell. Why are we not coming together as a community to put up positive, good stories, things that we can celebrate together and share with our future generation, share with the young one, inspire them to stay on in the career, to stay on in shipping, and then how to help them, to come along. And that one day when we look back, when I look back, there will be no regrets, because we raise up many good people in Maritime. And because of all of you here, you are inspiring. So why don't we put together stories, your stories, perhaps, I don't know whether SMF or, we all can do it together and share your experiences, share your stories, and impact the lives of our future generation. So there are many gaps that we need to address, but I think this is one of the ways that we can start off with.
Thank you, Mary. It's not the first time I've heard this week people say that we undersell the benefits and the value proposition of our industry. I think we've got a lot of work to do there to really shout and do a better job of that. So that was a great comment.
Just one thing I wanted to add. For SSA, I think you should continue to vote for Sister Caroline. She has a tremendous heart for the workers and for the seafarers as well. I think that is great. And there's one thing that I wanted to add on as well. While I support the foreign talent, the campus, framework, I think these are really, really good. I think these are the way forward. But at the same time, I also appeal to all of you here to please join us to continue to build the Singapore core. Singapore is an IMC, International Maritime Center. We still need a core group of Singaporeans. I'm not asking for big numbers here, but just a core group. Let's work together towards that and give our Singaporean seafarers and those in maritime a chance, an opportunity. Very important. When the new vessels come on, when you have the latest, excite them, motivate them, get them to work ashore as well for a short period of time when they are not sailing out there. Let them have a feel of what it is to be working in the office, in the management, have experience. And when they go out back there sailing, they know exactly why certain decisions are made in certain ways. And I think it is very, very important to excite them, and I think we all have a responsibility in doing that as well. Help them to transit from sea to shore, because we don't want to lose them at the end of the day when they come ashore. They may not be sailing for the rest of their life, but how do we help them to transit? I think this is something that we can work together, and we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. So I do need to close now. I've been keeping a close eye on the top voted pigeonhole questions, and hopefully we've answered the majority of the highest voted ones through the discussion. But I really want to say absolutely fantastic. The level of passion, the level of insights that we've got from the panel today really showed that we've got a lot of work to do. It's quite clear, but I think between the passion, the perspectives, we can tackle and embrace some of these opportunities. So thank you again to a fantastic panel for your contributions today, and thank you for listening.